administrative issue that we'll need to touch base on that I asked Marvin to remind me about. Okay, starting with our learning sponsors. Year of Learning, Sue and Ann Garelick, in memory of Malka Pearl Mann and Philip Mann, and Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Yosef Meir ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, and Yerivka Perel Brezner Bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, and in memory of family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Shall assure her children and grandchildren in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva, Marcia Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon. Sharon and Fred Liska, their family and many friends. In memory of
anyone else having connection problems like I am?
What? Who is having a connection problem?
Having connection problems. Anyone else?
Who is speaking?
Well, you're on.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe it's just my line is bad. If everyone else is good, fine. Okay.
Your sound is on.
Yeah, but the connection, I can hardly hear the rabbi. Okay,
Oh.
we'll continue.
Okay, you may have to adjust your sound. Okay, I had to do that.
Okay. But it keeps going in and out. It keeps wavering, and okay, now it's better. Let's hope for the best.
Sharon and Fred Liska, the family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Edel Bas Yaakov, Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their dear parents, Harry and Marjorie Sedell, and Irving and Pearl Kaplan, friends of Avi Gitler, Avramea ben Shimon and Martha Gitler, Chana Bas Yeshaya, friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova Bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levy, Malka Bat Yosef, friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim, many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi. Month of Learning, Mindel and David Cheslow, in memory of her mother, Shosha Bat Ber Leib, Carol and Josh Sanborn, in memory of her mother, Yita Bat Nachman Ben Yamin. Week of Learning by Lenny Bahar, in memory of her husband, Yitzchak Ben Menachem, Jack Gilman, in memory of his father, Yitzchak Ben Avram Chaim, Sharon and Michael Glass, in memory of her father, Shlomo Ben Yosef Cohen, Florence Griebler, in memory of her husband, Mikhail. Also have a week of learning by Eugene and Cherna Kowalski in honor of their granddaughter, Reiki Finer's graduation from NYU Silver School of Social Work. The Day of Learning and the Torah Fund. Okay, today is the, Today is the 3rd? No, the 2nd? Today is the 2nd. Okay. So we have a Day of Learning by Ralph and Honey Chaffetz in memory of his father, Yehuda ben Shraga Feivel. Shemas have an Aliyah, Krank Rafia, Valti Yeshira Shemat Aliyah, L'chol B'nai Yisrael, a good Geben Shtiyar.
Amen.
Okay, so we had started the top, a little bit of 2A, okay, and we got up to the point, I believe, that Ravina was going to make a challenge, right? Because we saw that this question of the rabbis not knowing the status of that area between the two curtains of 1 cubit regards to whether it was part of the Kodesh Kadoshim or whether it was part of the sanctuary, part of the Hechal. Okay? And that was the last statement we had, Amar Rabbi Natan, Ama Traxin, and we talked about Traxin being a term, a Greek term meaning gate or inside, outside area, right? And lo hichriu bo chachamim I kilefnim kilachutz. So Gemara picks up. Ravina mat kifla Ravina. My Tama, what was the reason that the sages should not know what the status of this 1 cubit area between the two curtains? Ilema mishum dichtiv, if we're going to say because it was written, V'habayit asher bana hamelech Shlomo l'Hashem, shishim ama arko, ve'esrim rachbo, u'shloshim ama komato. Okay, citing a pasuk from Malachim Aleph, chapter 6. The house that King Solomon built was 60 cubits in length. In other words, and its width was 20 cubits, and its height was 30 cubits. Okay? So that gives us the dimensions of what I'm going to call for the moment, the inside dimensions of the combination of the Heichal and the Kodshei Kadoshim. Now a further pasuk, Uktiv, and then it's written, Va'arba'im ba'ama haya habayit, hu ha'heichal l'fnai. Okay, again, same chapter, 1 Kings chapter 6, and therefore the partition, 20 cubits in length, and 20 cubits in width, and 20 cubits in height. Okay? Now, that seems to indicate a smaller area. For the moment, let's consider that the Kodshei Kadoshim. Okay? Problem, however, is that we have a difference in height measurement there. Okay? Now, Uktiv, V'lifnei hadavir, Esrim ama orech ve'esrim ama rochav ve'esrim ama komata. Okay. So that pasuk then, okay, before the partition, 20 cubits in length, 20 cubits in width, 20 cubits in height. Okay. So that would seem to give the dimensions of the Heichal. Okay, but again, notice that there was a slight difference in height measurement. But the phrase, okay, before the partition is the significant phrase. Remember being the fact that we said there was a wall in the first temple, but no such wall in the second temple. And so Ravina continues his objection. V'lo yad'inan ama traksin, imehani esrim, ve'imehani arba'im. Excuse me. And we don't know, argued Ravina, whether this 1 cubit partition, in other words, the area between the two curtains, was considered part of the 20, okay, in the Kodshei Kadoshim, or part of the 40 in the Heichal. And so the Gemara picks up, Vidilma, and perhaps, according to Ravina, Lo mahane esrin, v'lo mahane arba'in. Perhaps it's not really part of the 20. Perhaps it's not really part of the 40. V'chalala kachashev. And this empty space, okay, is not really even included in the count. Why? Kotlim, or kotalim, lo kachashev. Why? Because we did not include in that psukim the thickness of the walls. Okay? And so maybe if that was considered a wall, at least in times of the first temple, it also wasn't going to be included in those dimensions. The same way the side walls, or the back wall, or the front wall, okay, were not included in those dimensions. Kotalim lo kachashev. And the Gemara picks up Teda, Dechol heicha, the kachashev kotalim, chashev le lididei, says the Gemara. Know that anywhere that the walls were counted, okay, it also would have counted then that 1 cubit partition. Ditnan, as we find the following Mishnah. This is still part of Ravina's discussion. Ha'hechal me'ah al me'ah berom me'ah. In other words, the sanctuary, the entire building area, was 100 cubits by 100 cubits by a height of 100 cubits. Right? Al me'ah berom me'ah. Kotel ulam chamesh. The walls of the ulam, of the anteroom, were 5 cubits wide. Vaha'ulam achat esrei. And the ulam, the entrance hall, antechamber itself, okay, was 11 cubits wide. Kotel ha'hechal, the wall then between the ulam and the sanctuary and the, right, hechal. What about that? Right? All right, says the Gemara in this Mishnah, I'm sorry, Kotel ha'echal sheish was 6 cubits wide. V'arko arba'im amah v'amah teraksim. And the length of the hechal, of the sanctuary, was 40 cubits, and the space, 1 cubit in that partition, okay, that area, okay, between as a wall or as the curtains, and then going on, ve'esrim amah beit kodshei hakedoshim, and the kodshei kadoshim, the inner sanctuary, holy of holies, was 20. Kotel ha'echal sheish, the back wall then of the entire facility was 6 cubits. Vahata sheish, and then there was an empty area. Let's call it a chamber for a moment, okay, which was again 6 cubits wide. V'kotel hata chamesh, and the wall, outside wall of that chamber was 5 cubits wide. Okay, so that gave us a total. Now, Ella, rather, says the Mishnah, kedushate ikilifnim ikilachutz. So he's arguing that the problem was not the measurement, but was the question of the sanctity of that area. Okay? So having said this now, we find the Gemara doesn't give a total answer, but proceeds, however, to another aspect, another topic. Okay? And let's continue. V'hainu da'amar Rabbi Yochanan. And this is what Rabbi Yochanan said. Ba'e Yosef ish hutzal. That there was a dilemma, a question raised by Yosef, who was of Hutzal. And he cites Udavir betoch habayit mipnina hechin l'titein et aron brit Hashem. Okay, again, in that same chapter of Book of Kings 1, chapter 6, the pasuk said, and he prepared a partition in the midst of the house, within to set there the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Translation. Ibaya lahu. And so he asked the sages, Hechi ka'amar kra. What is this pasuk talking about? In other words, what partition is there? So the Gemara wants to try to explain what the issue is. Udavir betoch habayit mipnima Hechin Letitain Sham. Okay, so that's citing the pasuk again. Are we talking about something that Solomon built inside the Beis Hamikdash? Okay, which would be a place for the Aron. Okay, and is that to be placed in the Kodshe Kadoshim? Is it to be placed in this partition? O Dilma Hachi Ka'amar. Or perhaps this is what's meant. Udavir betoch habayit mipnima. That the partition was in the midst of the house within. In other words, that there is a clear partition built to separate the area of the Heichal from the area of the Kodshe Kadosh. So the Gemara then raises the following question. Umi misapkale, and was Yosef Ish Hutzal, what was he doubting? What was his problem? Bahatanya, because aren't we taught elsewhere in a Braita, Isi ben Yehuda Omer, that Isi ben Yehuda said, Chamesh mikraot b'Torah ein lehem hechreya, that there were 5 different psukim throughout the Torah that it's not clear how to, I'm going to say, read the pasuk in an appropriate manner so that the pshat meaning of the pasuk is clear. Okay, so we're now, as a result of this, continuing to the next Amud, but we're going to get into a sidebar, a lengthy sidebar on these psukim. Okay, these at least 5 examples. Okay, so what has the Gemara done? It has just cited a word from the pasuk. Okay, so the first example is from Breshit chapter 4, verse 7. Okay, it's part of the Cain and Hevel story. And it says as follows, Halo im teitiv sa'et, ve'im lo teitiv, lefetech chatat rovetz, ve'elechet teshukato, va'ata timshol bo. So the word sa'et is the problematic phrase. Okay? And so how do you explain the pasuk? Okay, and I'm using Koren's translation here. If you do well, shall it not be lifted up? Okay, so that would understand sa'et as like nosei avon, to forgive a sin. Okay, or do you read it differently? Okay, if you do well, you will lift up your sin, and if you don't do well. So the phrase sa'et there is a problematic phrase, because if he doesn't do well, it means the sin will not be forgiven and will be remembered, and he'll be punished. Okay, that's the first case. Second example. Okay, is found in Shmot, chapter 25, verse 34. Here's the second example. Ubimenorah arba'a gvi'im meshukadim kaftoreha upracheha. And the problematic word is meshukadim. Okay, because it's not clear unless one looks, by the way, at the trope. Okay, whether meshukadim refers to the words that come before it. In regards to the candelabra, it has 4 cups that are like meshukadim, that they are like almond blossoms, or whether the word meshukadim applies to the words that come after it, kaftoreha upracheha, okay, implying that it should be read, okay, differently, that its flowers were the shape of almond blossoms. So it's not clear, again, which part of the verse that word is associated with. Okay. Next example, right, is in Exodus 17, verse 9, the word machar. Okay. And we have it, right, as follows. Vayome Moshe el Yehoshua, Bechar lanu anashim, v'tzei hilachem ba'amalek machar, anochi nitzav al rosh hagivah, umata ha'alokim biyadi. Story of Moshe telling Yoshua to prepare for the war against Amalek. Problematic word, machar, tomorrow. Which part of the pasuk does it identify with? Is it Moshe's telling Yoshua, choose people and go war against Amalek tomorrow? Is that the case? Or is the case situation that Moshe is telling him, tomorrow I will go sit on the hill with what do you call it? The staff of Hashem in my hand. And so that it's the next day that Yeshua is going to attack. So again, the problem, which part of the pasuk does the word belong to? If we did not have trope. Okay. Next case is Aror. We come back to Breshit. Okay. This time, chapter 49, verse 7. Aror apam ki az ve'evratam ki kashata achalkem bi'Yaakov va'afitzem bi'Yisrael. Okay, it's part of the, let's call it the statement of Jacob, of Yaakov, towards Shimon v'Levi, a cursing statement. Right? Cursing their anger, arur apam ki az avratam, of ki az, cursing their anger because it's fierce, it's cruel, or do we say, okay, that it refers to something else, namely the previous pasuk, okay, that would have been read, B'Sodom al tavo nafshi, B'kahalam al techar kvodi, ki ba'apam hargu ish, uvirtsanam ikru shor arur. Okay? That was again the problem. And the other example is now in Dvarim, okay, chapter 31, verse 16, the word vekam, okay. And we have the pasuk that says, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Incha shochev im avotecha, vekam ha'am hazeh, v'zana acharei Elokei helechar haaretz, asher hu vashama bekirbo, v'azavani v'hefer et briti, asher karati ito. Okay? And so again, the question is v'kam. Which part of the pasuk does the word get read with? The earlier part, okay? Shochev im avatecha v'kam. You'll sleep with your ancestors and then rise up. Okay, so it is a more positive statement at the time of resurrection of the dead. Or does it go with the later part of the pasuk? V'kam ha'am hazeh v'zana acharei Elohei nechar haaretz. That the people will rise up and then they will prostitute themselves, so to speak, by following false gods, other gods, and go astray. Okay? So that's the discussion of those psukim. Vahatanya, as we continue back in the Gemara, Hu Yosef Ish Hutzal. And this Braita was taught, okay, by Yosef of Hutzal, who apparently had some other names or nicknames. Hu Yosef Bavli. He was also known as Yosef the Babylonian. Hu Isi ben Yehuda. He was also known as Isi, which was a nickname for Yosef, the son of Yehuda. Hu Isi ben Gur Aryeh. And he was also known as Isi, the son of the lion, so to speak, because the symbol of Yehuda was the lion. Hu Isi ben Gamliel. And he was also known as Isi, the son of Gamliel. Okay. Hu Isi ben Mahalalel. Umashmo, and what he also known as Isi, the son of Mahalalel. What was his actual name? Isi ben Akiva Shmo. Isi, the son of Akiva, B'Deoraita Leka, B'Neviata Ika. Okay, and continuing, the Gemara tells us, okay, is it really such that there were only 5 such psukim in the Torah, whereas in the prophets we have many more? Okay. So the Gemara responds, Ubida Oraita Leka, you're saying that in the Torah there were no more than 5 psukim that were difficult to understand the pshat? Vaha Ika Dabai Rav Chisda. But we have then the question, the issue raised, the dilemma by Rav Chisda, with the following pasuk: Vayeshlach et na'arei b'nei Yisrael v'ya'alu olot. And he sent the young man of the children of Israel who sacrificed burnt offerings. Again, a pasuk from Shmot chapter 24. Okay. So how do we understand that? Kivasim, did they offer sheep? What about the fact that it says, V'yizbechu zvachim shlamim parim? That the pasuk then says they sacrificed as peace offerings bulls. O dilma idi ve'idi parim, or perhaps both these and these, namely the olot and the shlamim were bulls. The Rav Chisda misafkale. For Rav Chisda, this was a problematic verse. The Isi ben Yehuda pshitale. For Isi ben Yehuda, okay, this was not a problem. The answer was obvious to him. And that's the end of that particular piece. We get now to a new Mishnah. Okay? Mishnah is going to bring us back to our discussion of what we said as to how the Kohen Gadol was going to get from the front of the building, if you will. In other words, once he passed through the Ulam and began going through the Heichal, okay, we said basically the Gemara seemed to conclude that he could walk straight through until he came to the double curtains. And we saw that there was a machloket in terms of the double curtains where there was an opening. According to one person, there was an opening on one end, in other words, what we'll call for the moment the north end. According to somebody else, there was an opening in the other end on the south end, right? So what do we see as this Mishnah tells us? Matnitin, okay? Hachitzona, the outer, we're talking about the outer curtain, okay? In other words, the first curtain that the Kohen Gadol would encounter. Pirupa or Pirufa min hadaron. Okay, that was hooked in such a manner that the opening was on the south side. Okay? Upnimit min hatzafon, and the inner curtain, in other words, the second curtain, the one closer to the Kodshe Kedoshim, that apparently was open on the north side. Okay? So what would happen? The Kohen Gadol would have to do as follows. He would go in one side, Mahalech B'neihem Ad Shemagia L'Tzafon. Okay, he would have to walk in on the south side, walk down the length of the area between the two curtains till he got to the other opening, and then come out from there into the area of the Kodshe Kedoshim. Okay, Higia L'Tzafon, when he reached the north. In other words, once he passed the opening of that second curtain, Hofech Panav L'Darom, he would then face south, Mahalech L'Smolo, Ad HaParochet, Ad Shehu Magia L'Aron, and he would walk about halfway, again, down the length of the curtain, okay, until he would be able to face the ark itself, okay, inside the Kodshe Kedoshim. Okay, so he would come in on the south side, walk up between the, I'm saying up in the terms of going north, till he reached the opening in the second curtain, turn in, walk back south about halfway, and then turn and face directly the ark. Now, where was the Aron here? This is another question. Higia Aron. He comes now to face the Aron. Okay? Where was the Aron? Or what does he do? Notain et hamachta bein shnei habadim. He puts down the coal pan, okay, right? Between the two, let's call it the poles, right? Between the two areas, and the Aron is in the middle. Now, the Aron may have been resting on the rock, on the foundation rock, or it may be on the floor level. It doesn't seem to tell us. What does he do then? Tzavar et haketoret al gabe hagechalim. And he then piles the incense on top of the coals. V'nitmale kol habayit kulo ashan. And then the entire Kodshe Kedoshim, okay, if you will, becomes full of smoke. Yatsa, he leaves the Kohen Gadol, uvalo b'derech beit knisato, and he exits, excuse me, the same way he had entered. However, now that he's on, let's say, the back inside the Heichal, umitpalel tefila ktsara b'bayit hachitzon, and he recites a short prayer inside the outer area, what we're calling the Heichal. V'lo yahaya ma'arich b'tfilato, and he would not extend, right? He would not enlarge this prayer. Why? Shelo lahavit et Yisrael, in order so that the Jewish people who are waiting outside would not be alarmed, would not be concerned. That was our Mishnah. Now the Gemara wants to continue now, okay, and clarify. Okay, What are the circumstances that the Mishnah is talking about in terms of his entrance or exit from the Kodesh Kadoshim? B'mayas Kinan, asks the Gemara, what are we dealing with here? Ilema b'mikdash rishon. If we're talking about the first temple, mihavu parochet, do we say there was even a curtain there? Ela b'mikdash sheni. So we must be talking about the second temple. Mihava aron. But was there even an ark there that he would face in the second temple? Why? Because the Gemara now explains. Vahatanya. Because weren't we taught elsewhere in a Braita? Misha nignaz aron. Once the ark was hidden. Niza imo tzinsenet haman. There was also hidden with it, and I'm using the word hidden, okay? I could use the word, Koren wants to use the word buried. I don't know what Art Scroll has. Anybody see a translation there? Guys? Okay? Right? Also was, I'm using again, hidden, the container, the jar of the manna. Okay? In addition, utzluchit shemen hamishcha, and also the flask that contained the anointing oil.
Yeah, our scroll also has hidden, Rabbi.
It also has hidden. Okay.
Yeah.
That's why I prefer that than buried. Koren has a note on it. I'm not going to go into it except to indicate that they translated it buried because they thought it was placed in tunnels underneath the Beis HaMikdash. Okay. Anyway, so what else was hidden? The staff that had belonged to Aaron that had sprouted the almonds and the blossoms. Right? And in addition, something else. V'argaz sheshigru plishtim doron lelohei Yisrael. And the chest, okay, that had been sent by the Philistines when they sent back the Aron, okay, after they had captured it, right, and had suffered numerous plagues, right. Shneimar, as it's written, Uklei hazahav asher hashivatam lo asham tasimu ba'argaz mitzido v'shilachtem oto v'halach. That's in the 1 Samuel chapter 6. They put the jewels of gold returning to him for a guilt offering in a coffer by its side and sent it away that it may go. So the question now continues, says the Gemara, Umi Ganazo, who was the one who buried it or hid it? Yoshiyahu Ganazo, King Josiah. Mara Asha Ganazo, what did he see? What was the reason that he did so? Ra'asha Katuv, he saw that it was written, Yolech Hashem otcha ve'et malkecha asher takim alecha. A pasuk that was in Devarim, Deuteronomy, the end, chapter 28. The Lord will bring you and your king whom you shall set over you. Okay, in other words, there was a pasuk that he understood when they discovered a volume of Devarim, okay, or a klaf of Devarim, that implied the future destruction of the temple and the exile of the monarchy. Okay? And therefore, what happens? Amad Uganazo. And therefore, he did not want the ark to go into exile, and therefore he hid it. Shneimar, as it says elsewhere, now furthermore, Vayomer leLeviim hamevinim l'chol Yisrael hakadoshim l'Hashem tanu et Aron hakodesh b'bayit asher bana Shlomo ben David melech Yisrael, Eim lechem masa b'kateif ata, ivdu et Hashem Elokeichem v'et amo Yisrael. Pasuk now from Chronicles 1, chapter 35. And he said to the Levites who taught all of Israel, who were sacred to Hashem, put the sacred ark in the house that Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, built. There shall no more be a burden upon your shoulders. Now serve the Lord your God and his people Israel. They would no longer be carrying the Aron. It would instead stay in the Beis Hamikdash. And instead their job was to proceed with the service, Ivdu et Hashem, whether it was the instruments, the singing, so on and so forth, as well as they were the gatekeepers, the guards. Okay? In that regard, by the way, just as a quick aside, we can see that the concept, the Havdil, that the Vatican chose Swiss guards to protect, is really modeled after this example of the Leviim being the protectors of the Beis Hamikdash. Another time we'll go into more detail on how it was the tribe Levi got progressed to that point. Okay. Va'amar Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Elazar was quoted as saying, Atya Shama Shama, Va'atya Dorot Dorot. He says the same lesson can be learned by a verbal analogy, Gzera Shava, on Psukim. Okay? That in one case, the pasuk had the word in it there, okay? And in another case, it had the word there. Okay? Also, we see the word generations, and then in another pasuk, we see the word generations. Now, Rabbi Elazar also then continued and said, Va'atya mishmeret mishmeret. And therefore, we can also use a further Gzera Shava with the word mishmeret for safekeeping. Okay. In one case, it applied to the staff of Aaron. Okay, that's in Bamidbar 17. And in another case, okay, we say that it applies, okay, to the Aron as well. Now, the Gemara, however, now proceeds and tells us, Le'olam b'mikdash sheni. Therefore, it would appear that what we're talking about is clearly the second Beis Hamikdash. Umahi gila Aron. And what does it mean when our Mishnah said that the Kohen Gadol reached the place of the Aron? Makom Aron, the place where the Aron would have been located. V'hakatani natanet hamachta levein shnei abadim. But here our Mishnah clearly taught that he placed the coal pan between the two poles where the Aron would have been placed, would have been located. Ema kivein shnei habadim. I would say explain it and say that it's between the two poles where the ark would have been. Now we go back to our Mishnah where it said, Tzavar et haketoret al gabe gechalim, that he piled the incense on top of the coals. Tznan, we learned, Kiman de amar tzovra, according to whom? Okay, did he say that he piles it? Tane chada, one Tana says, Tzovra pnima, that he piled it. Let's say it, I'm going to put it, okay, closer or inside. What does it mean inside? Shehi chutzolo, that it was further away from him and closer to the side of the coal pan where the Aron would have been. V'tanya idach, And another Braita tells us, Tzovra chutza, that he piled it outside. Shehi pnim alo, that it was actually closer to him, okay, and further away from the side of the coal pan that was near the Aron. Amar Abaye, and Abaye points out, Tana'ahi, that this was a machloket Tanaim. Va'amar Abaye, and he's further said, Abaye, Mistabra, Keman Amar Pnima Shehi Chutzalo. It seems more logical, okay, that we explain it, that it was in regards to the incense being put in the coal pan closer to the Aron, right? Amar Pnima Shehi Chutzalo, further away from the Kohen Gadol. Why? Tatznan, because we have another Mishnah that tells us, Melamdin Oto Hizaher, that when they taught the Kohen Gadol what to do, they gave him a warning. They told him to be careful. In other words, if he put the incense on top of the coal pan closer to him, it could be that he might burn himself, right? And so that's what the next Amud tells us on 53a, Shalo tatchil mipanecha shema tekaveh. Okay, that not putting the incense too close to you. Okay, why? Because it's possible you would get burnt. Right? And so we're going to stop there at that point, and we'll pick up tomorrow. Okay, the whole next of the Gemara. Okay, where we will deal more details with what went on with the coal pan and the incense there in the side the Kodshe Kadoshim. We would see that it has a reference in part to the fact that there were different viewpoints between the Prushim and the Tzedukim as well. Okay, and how the Gemara deals with that whole issue. Okay, so everybody take care. All right.
Hey, Rabbi, don't forget now.
Oh,
Thank
right.
you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Okay, so
Don't go off yet.
thanks, Marvin. I almost did forget. Okay.